everyone, to the Next Best Picture podcast, where we are talking with Nathan Crowley, the production designer for Wicked. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem, no problem.
Very, very excited to talk to you today. You are the genius behind the visuals of some of my most favorite films of the past several years. So this is a particular treat for me. But I'm curious, and I asked this question to Paul Tazewell, who designed the costumes as well. You don't just in this film have the shadow of the designs from the Broadway show hanging over you, but you also have the shadow of the 1939 film, The Wizard of Oz. These are two extremely iconic pieces of media that a lot of people have attraction to and love for in their own lives. How long did you allow yourself to freak out about the task that you had before you before you got down to work? And when you did, how did you approach this job at a macro level?
Yeah, I mean, I think my sort of extreme optimism and naivety helped me not realize uh, what I was doing. But I think the reality is I've been, ever since I was a kid, you watch The Wizard of Oz every single year. So that was the easy part, and it was like, oh my, I mean, but also the hardest part because you've got to do Oz, and then realization of the stage show was like, okay, it's like it's a character driven piece. These, ultimately these two great friends who affect each other's lives so dramatically. So, but and then visually, I was realizing, oh, I've got to do this, but in Oz, at the scale of the Wizard of Oz, and succeed at describing the Emerald City and the journey to it. And so, cinema for me, which I love, is about sort of explaining places and landscapes and environments, and creating the whole place rather than an individual set. So, that becomes a large task on a fantasy, but one I think I've been building up to I think it took every film I've ever done to do this one to understand how to do it, because we have to put people in Oz, we have to build it. And I come from a very practical filmmaking build background. Like, if we can build it, we will. And the joy of building it is you get to create it, uh, and not digitally. And I think, and you get people to touch and feel the space and the landscape. If you can get out into landscapes, then you really sort of create this whole place. So where did I start? Well, I started with the map of Oz, thinking, where is everything? There's a big learning lesson. I started with the books. Um, it's really, I tried to sort of come up with all these building blocks for Oz. Like, in the first film is Emerald City, Shiz, Munchkin Land. The second film we get into Kiamako and where everything was and what their landscape was. What their influence on the place is. And so I started with sort of trying to decide, for myself personally, the building blocks of Oz, which is the Grimmery, is to me was the land and the place and the sort of ancient culture and the ancient magic. And Shiz was the time of harmony, an ancient seat of learning between all its peoples, including animal. And Emerald City was the time of people, uh, and it was the time of the wizard. So once I had these building blocks, I could sort of think historically of how this place could be made. So I jumped into Munchkin Land because I thought that would be the easiest place to start. And of course, it's really not. Nothing's
No,
easy.
no.
But I wanted to put a stamp on practical filmmaking. So my first task was like, John wanted this whimsical, colorful world. And it's like, okay, the theme, all the colors of the rainbow. If the Munchkins are farmers, what are they farming? What are they doing? And so we came up with, well, maybe they cloth makers and they farm color. And of course, the tulips arrived. It was like all the colors of the rainbow, and but with the practical hat on, it was like, we're going to plant 9 million tulips. I really wanted to start this thing by saying, putting my intentions firmly on the table to the entire film, saying, I'm going to plant 9 million tulips with a farmer. I can do it. I'm going to make this a reality, create the first landscape. And then really it's about like your intentions. You have to hold fast the things you can do. Of course, there's all kinds of digital stitching to get the Munchkin Land backlot built into the field of the flower. There's lots of digital work, but the true mesh of practical filmmaking and digital is when you build enough that the photographic imagery make it seamless. Sorry.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where I started.
Well, I was gonna you bring up the, the sort of the divide and the connection between the production design and visual effects. And I was curious, like both in general where you find that like your job ends and the visual effects work begins, but also how your collaboration with them worked specifically for this film.
Well, I think Pablo, visual effects supervisor, and I agreed. We said if I can give you enough height of set, apart from going above traditional matte lines, it also gives him photographic information of what the rest should look like above. So with Alice lighting it and all the textures, we could then give him all the information he needs to get vertical. So I needed to build as high as possible. And these backlots that we built were the biggest sets I've ever built in my life. And I've built
They're
lots of
pretty
big
stunning. I
sets.
mean, the
If you
scale
can
is
get that,
incredible.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and if you can get that level of detail and you can get up to 50 foot, it makes visual effects it makes it seamless because you can add in visual effects to the lower portion seamlessly because it doesn't feel, there's enough reality for it not to feel like a visual effect. So you draw, I guess our job is to, along with visual effects, is to be a little quiet in the background and let the drama play out. And we can't jump the audience out. And I think if you do practical filmmaking, you've got to get the audience to fall into the film. Which I think they might have, I hope. So
Well, I tell you, I certainly did. I think that one of the fun things about the sort of Aussian design scheme is that you can also kind of see the mechanical workings of things. Like you can kind of see how things open up and work on the mechanical level. And I was curious that how much of the set pieces and things that you built for this actually work in the way that it looks like they do.
well, I mean, they work. The spinning wheels
Yeah.
in the library are fully automated, and they move in different directions. All the ladders are independent, and that's due to our phenomenal special effects mechanical team. And so, it's cues from Royal Wedding, Fred Astaire. It's like cues from 2001 where you get the set moving because it's a dance number. And if the set can move as well as the dancers, then I love seeing that. Because it's like it all moves, and so that's all real. And the mechanical wizard's head is all puppeteered and hydraulic, but it's important. The theory is the wizard's an illusionist, and illusionists use automatons and mechanics because, like the famous orange tree that grows is a watchmaker's built by a watchmaker, and it's mechanical in an organic nature. So he's the illusionist, the man behind the curtain, and so it should all be puppeteered. He comes from that period in time when that was the mysteries, and that's where the great illusionists had their day, So I've always loved that stuff. So to have a actual puppeteered hydraulic head that was made of wood, um, because you have to sort of touch where the wizard's from in this time period, so it can't be too futuristic. In a curtain, and because the curtain is to me an art installation of string of different colored
Yeah.
greens. not a curtain, not a traditional curtain. So for the head to come with my favorite film of the Wizard moment, sorry, my favorite moment of the Wizard of Oz is when I am Oz. It's like phenomenal. So we have to achieve that in a different sense. And so the head and the mist and the string parting and the eye coming through, and it's like you have he has an intimidation machine, you know? And so that all the mechanics of, I mean, even the map room, all the lids lifted hydraulically, and the backings came up and down theatrically, and it's all miniatures lit up. Um, and it's just fun. It's like old school techniques uh, to do
Yeah.
that. So
It's so much fun to watch, and I feel like around every corner there's something new and eye-popping to look at. It's very fun. I'm just so glad you brought up those circular bookshelves in the library because as a huge bookworm, I wondered why I had been missing these from my local library for all my life. Um, and I like just who came up with the idea for these crazy library shelves that turn in that way and the ladders that was all out of your head?
yeah, I got guilty as charged. I mean,
uh
really, I always like moving sets,
mm,
but and mainly because of childhood and James Bond and bookshelves moving, you know what I mean, and secret places and um,
yeah,
so I knew I wanted to do these wheels and I wanted to turn these wheels because I've already wanted to, like Fierro. He's the coolest dude. Like if he pulls a lever and dances in spinning shelves, it's like, I mean, obviously there's a problem of gravity with circular bookshelves, but it's Oz, and I'm okay with that. And really, once I came up with that idea, showed it to John, and he was like, "Great." He just said, "Great," and really the set was designed around them, not for the set wasn't designed. Then we put these in. The whole set we designed to focus on those bookshelves. So that's really the most important bit was me for they let me build these spinning shells. I mean, special effects built them and engineered them. Paul
yeah,
Colbert, who is a genius, who I've worked with many times. Um, I said, "Come, we got to get this. We got to do this." He's game. He's really the thing about all these sort of the special effects engineers, the artists, the plasterers. The thing about physical filmmaking is they bring so much to the table. All these artists who can do amazing things, and they change it. They make it better. So because we're building it physically, there's a sort of time period between the idea and the illustration to the physicalness, and it sort of evolves and changes by the input of all these incredible people. Because they are so into what they do. They say, "Well, how about this? How about that?" So it just gets better. My favorite bit in the film, it was two favorite bits, is actually going through that construction process because you sort of start making something, it becomes something real. And the second favorite bit is always the actors coming onto the set going, "Oh, Jesus, we're in Oz." you know,
I
and
bet.
seeing how they react. I always keep well out of the way and just observe them as they, like the powerful head coming through the curtain. And I just love to see their reactions because they get to be in Oz. Um, and I think that's got to be a help to an actor. So
I'm sure. I mean, it's so much fun. Just to look at, I can't imagine what it must have been like to work amongst those sets every day. Um, I know we're coming up at the end of our time together, but I had to ask you, like, especially when it comes to a project like this, you've talked a lot about how you like to work on world building and creating these new worlds and new spaces for people to walk into. So I'm curious, like when you start a project and you're thinking about building this world, where do you start? Do you start about just thinking about where the world is and what has influenced it, or do you think about the actual like people who live in this world who built these spaces and what their goals were, or is it something else entirely?
I come from sort of big picture outlook. So I get to the people and what they do, but I don't start with that. I always start with like what shapes do I love? Like what landscapes do I love? You know, little
Ah,
like a big giant board of things, and what applies to that? What applies just things I'd like to see, like pink railway arches. And it can be anything, and so it's just it's sort of you sort of feel it out. It's instinctual, like, and you start with all these sort of collected imagery, and like that could be an interesting sculpture. You'd put a piece of sculpture on that, but that's a shape. Maybe that piece of sculpture is Austrian architecture. These are all sort of pie in the sky ideas, and you sort of take that entire board, and then you start sort of honing it down and going inward and inward and inward until you get to, I think the Munchkins are like this, but what on earth do they do? So I don't really come at it the other way. I have a great set decorator, Lee Sandels, who comes at it the other way, saying, "Well, what if they did this?" And so I'm starting here, and he's starting below, and we sort of meet in the middle and go, "Okay, I think we have something." And then we get John involved. John Chu, and he says, "Let's do it. Let's throw this and this in," and he sort of doubles down on it, which is brilliant. He always pushes the idea as far as possible. So,
well, that sounds like a perfect symbiotic working relationship, and you can see it in the final product. This film is so transportive, and it just looks fantastic.
oh, no. Thanks very much, Daniel.
Well, thank you so much for your work on the film, and thank you for speaking with us about it today.
No problem. Take care.
You too.